I've got my plate, I've got my padded paper, my grid lines underneath my vellum, and I'm working off this one. So I'm going to start with what's called an envelope, which is basically a linear container that's going to sum up all my outside edges of this foot. Now they have a diagonal that goes through here, it cuts off the ankle. I'm going to work more from that tip of the ankle down to that toe box. So my bottom edge is really already in because it's the bottom of my plate, the bottom grid line. For this angle, again, it's basically my longest angle, I'm looking to hit the toe to here. Now this is another helpful hint, is to block in. I can go right over the plate. I'm kind of building a muscle memory just by running my pencil along here. And I'm looking at this distance. I'm kind of getting a sense of this distance. This distance is going to be harder because it's much wider compared to this. So look here, kind of get the angle down. I'm not doing this angle, I'm not doing this angle. It's kind of this angle. Go over here and very lightly put it in. I'm using very light, very soft, very long lines. I'm not stopping right here and making it from here down. I'm extending my lines because I want my eyes to be looking past those intersecting areas. If I make my hand do it, my eye has to do it. So that's a way to keep my eyes moving. So I'm placing what, to the best of my ability, that edge is. I can kind of test it with my sighting stick and go, okay, if I visually line up, I'm holding it in the air, but I'm kind of doing this, and then coming over here and the same thing, it looks close. Then I go to this one, because I want that back edge of that foot. So I'm looking at, okay, this lines up right where my vertical is, and this comes down here and creates this kind of gap. It's really a triangle. These are all kind of triangles. So to get that one down, now I'm working fully with a full arm movement. I'm standing at my easel. I'm shoulders length back. If I hold out a fist, it kind of meets, so I'm not super close. I'm not really close with my pencil. I'm holding my pencil like a conductor's wand, which forces me to work looser from the wrist, from the arm, from the elbow. And as I make this edge, because I'm working with my arm fully extended and a full arm movement, it might be a little wobbly. It might not go right through that point, but I'm also teaching myself how to create good line work. So I'm okay that that's, vibrating and a little off and a little fuzzy. I actually want that because I want my drawing to remain as light and fuzzy and shiftable as possible. If I came into this line and I choked up on my pencil and I said, okay, I think it's right here, and I think it's here and here, that visually looks very decisive and committed. And I'm saying to my mind, that's where that edge is. But the problem is I don't know if that's where that edge is. So if I do my vellum check and I line this up, and I'm lining it up to my grid lines that I can see underneath, and I look, see how off?
Yeah, wow.
But I've mentally decided that's where I'm putting it when I make a line that kind of dark and more hard. So now that I know just from that vellum check that that's off, I can kind of go further in here. I don't necessarily have to erase once I see it's off, but because that is so dark, I am going to lightly erase that. So this is an envelope basically. I've got my lower edge. Now I could practice, the line's already in there. That's okay. I've got that in. Here's my envelope. So I want to get this far. I want to get an envelope shape in and get this far and test what I have before I go any further. But I'm not going to, I tested a minute ago just on that line to prove a point or to show you something, but I wouldn't test after every edge is placed. I want to get some sense in my own eye of what's going on here. So before I test, let me make this a little more upright. This edge, this is going to be the big one to test. So here we go. I've got my envelope. I'm going to lay this over, line up my grid lines. Now I can tape it down. And so, look at that. Look at how off I was on this one. I mean, that's really wide. So to correct it, I know that's off. This one's pretty good. I can still bring it. See the angle of that? I've got it a little wide. I can still bring it down. It's meeting up well here. It's just a little bit wide. But it's really that one. The angle's good. It's just too far. It needs to be brought down. So it could be a case where maybe I had it closer, but the angle was off that way or that way. So I'm looking not just for the distance, but I'm looking for the tilt of that whole line. More working, less talking. That's my problem. This just goes to show you we're all learning as we go with this. I don't know where any of these edges go. I have to observe and explore and test and keep things open and shiftable. So let's say it's there. You don't normally have to erase everything that's inaccurate. I do want to keep some of that history or some of that structure up. So I'm looking at, how does this look? How does that look? The height to width. This looks a little bit narrow compared to that. So maybe my line ended up coming down and not flat. But I'm going to start in with the next step. Actually, let me check it. Let's do this. Let me just see. So that's much better. I'm meeting kind of on the upper edge. My band of lines is about 1/4 inch. The distance of that band of lines doesn't matter so much as it's at least making contact with my edge. Same with my toe. So I'm in the ballpark. It's still very softly defined. There's nothing definite, but I'm going to keep going. So let's break down this big foot shape and cut off the ankle or get that width of that ankle in there. So that whole line is maybe here. I know I often go too wide with my dimensions, so I'm going to intentionally make this a little bit more narrow than I feel it actually is, and that's probably more accurate than what, if I placed it out here. I already did that here. I was way too wide, so let's bring it in a little bit. How about this toe box? This is going to be one of the difficult dimensions, is the width of that toe box. Let's see if it's also got a slight slant to it. It's not totally upright. Maybe somewhere right about there. My pencil's starting to get a little dull. This is good. How about if we cut off the heel? As I cut this heel off, I'm looking at this distance. If I made an imaginary line here, what's this distance? Let's do that. Let's get the top of this toe box. Let's say it's right here. Again, light, soft lines. And then lastly, let's do this one. I know it's below this band of lines because that was up here, but it's not far. So maybe there, and so I can see it. Let's just get rid of some of these. So then we place our vellum over. I've already got it lined up. So my ankle, that's pretty close. And I went intentionally a little more narrow than I would have. My toe box, that's pretty close also. It's a little on the inside, so I'm going to be aware of that. This line could drop down even further. You see how I have it more up here? It's a little further down. My heel almost hit the mark. It went in a little bit much, but really not bad. So ankle's good, toe box can go out a little further, heel can go out just a little further, and that can come down. So let's do this. And as I make those corrections, I don't want to just correct based on, oh, I just told myself it's this, this, and this. I want to actually look and compare and go back to my source. So let's bring that out. That was good. Let's drop this down a little bit. Let's see, that edge. Let's do that edge. So this edge, the upper part of the leg or the ankle, it starts, 1/4 inch off my intersection and slants this much. So I want to make sure that I'm starting further over than right there. let's say there, got my ankle here, this I drop down. So now let's erase a few things so I can get a little bit of clarity. I've cut off my corners. I've gotten this negative space kind of honed in a little bit. Yeah, I would say that's pretty good. Maybe that a little bit more. This will come down. So I'm going to go to a sharper pencil. Looking at this line, I want to kind of break this whole edge up now. So I've got my ankle, my toe box, the upper part, and this whole edge. Let's break that into two lines, here and here. On that line, okay, that angle, here. Now they're very faint, but I can take my eraser, maybe clean up some of it. I don't want anything really defined though. Now that I've worked this area, I'm going to force myself to go over here because I don't want to work up one area too much further than the rest. So let's go back down to the heel. See, that's there. I've got that other part, that other edge that comes through here. That's a hard line to make, that long straight line. Now I want to get this big shadow shape in here. So where does the bottom of this come in? Let's see. Let's try it here. I'm looking at this distance to this distance to this distance. I'm comparing multiple different edges and lines. That's there. This, let's do this. This one, again, summing up that whole set of three lines in one line that's going to best convey that edge. So I worked the bottom, then I went to the top. I didn't come around and do ins and outs. I went from one side of that shape to the other. Let's get this back here. As I make this mark, I'm looking at this distance. I don't have this in yet, but I do have this back edge. So just a guess. Let's go across that to this line and add that in here, and then maybe this line. Let's see. So there we go. I work this side, I work this side. Maybe I can get this in. It's got a little more information I can go by. As I drop this down, I notice, okay, I hit the top really well, this line well, but I had it too long. The vellum tracing is showing me this bottom edge could go up further. So, but I didn't make it way down here. I didn't make it way up there. It's shiftable. It's still light and movable. So I would continue to work on all these lines until I get more and more structure in there. I think I'll cut it off at this point because just getting those main, even those first step or two, is going to be a big key in this process. But what I'll be looking for is just that light, soft line quality, because that's visually what's going to help you to keep things movable and correctable, and not deciding early, okay, it's got to be here because I think it's got to be there, and not knowing.